I will go ahead and officially welcome everyone this morning. Thanks for giving us a couple minutes just to make sure the tech worked. I'm sure everyone's used to this now with Zoom. But for those that don't know me, my name is Sarah Hagee. I am the Executive Director with the Electrical Association of Philadelphia. It's my pleasure to have you all here this morning. Joining me, of course, is my colleague, Matt Diber, and our speaker, Scott Peterson of Intertek, today's sponsor and new EAP member. A few housekeeping items before we get started, and forgive me, we go through these all the time, but if you're new, I just want to make sure you're aware that your mics and your cameras are turned off. We are recording this session, but you are welcome and encouraged to submit questions using the chat feature. My colleague Matt's going to facilitate those questions towards the end of the presentation with Scott. And of course, as always, after the presentation today, we will go ahead and send out the recording of today's session. You're welcome to share it with your colleagues, as well as Scott's contact information so you can follow up with any questions that you might have. So with that, it is now my pleasure to introduce Scott Peterson, staff engineer in charge of field label operations and inspections, and probably one of the busiest people I've ever met. Scott has 27 years of safety compliance experience, 25 which have been spent with Intertek. So with that, please join me in welcoming Scott. Thanks, Scott.
No problem. Thanks for having me this morning. I appreciate it. I got probably about 60 or so slides I'm going to go through. I'm not going to dwell on too many as we go through here. Like I said, if you have any questions, make sure they're directed through the chat, and I'll be more than happy to answer any questions when we're done and even afterwards, because I know how these things work. A lot of times the presentation goes on and 3 hours later you remember something. All my contact information is there, so feel free to reach out, email, text, call, or whatever. I'll be available. Okay. So without further ado, let me begin with talking about field evaluations that we carry out here at Intertek. A lot of field labels come about through the AHJs, through contractors, or even building owners. So this is going to be a little quick, cut and dry way to not get around these things, but get these things taken care of, and that's where Intertek comes into play in that area. Little background about Intertek. We began in 1896 with Thomas Edison. Edison's labs in West Orange is where we kind of grew from, and now we're this big. Actually, we have about 45,000 people worldwide in Intertek. So we've grown. We test anything you can think of, not just electrical products. We have a division in Ohio that does chemicals. There's a lot of different things that Intertek can do, but what you guys are concerned of right now is the electrical and the inspections out in the field. Here's all my information. I'm sure you're all going to have this at some point in time. Like I said, the best way to reach me is on my cell. You can either text or give me a buzz, because as Sarah mentioned earlier, I'm not really in the office that much. Some of the objectives I want to go over today, and what I hope to accomplish is basically laid out right here. I'm going to describe the basic differences between field evaluations, listed and certified and labeled products, understanding what a field label consists of, the actual work in the field, and then the actual evaluation report that will be issued when we're done. And basically, when do you really need to have a field evaluation? When do you need to have somebody come out and review what has been installed or what came from overseas that the inspector has said, hey, wait, guys, this is great for overseas, but it's not really great for what's going on here in the United States. You need somebody come in and help you out. So that's what we will, by the time we're done here, you'll know when to call and who to call. NEC Section 110, the conductors and equipment required or permitted by this code shall be accepted only if approved. Approved, that means acceptable to the authority having jurisdiction, the AHJ. Okay, I'm sure you all run into them in any building or any construction site that you run into. There's always the electrical inspector or the building inspector that's going to come by and say, hey, what's going on here? So you see that wherever you go, and I run into it all over the country. It's not just here in New York, New Jersey, Pennsylvania area. I've traveled all over the country to do these types of evaluations. So I don't think I'll see anything odd that I haven't seen before, but you never know. A listed equipment, listed products, listed materials are things that are out there. include are published by organizations that accept the AHJ concerned with evaluations of products or services. Okay, those listed equipment or materials are the periodic evaluation of services, and whose listing states that either the equipment, material, or service meets appropriate designated standard or has been tested and found suitable for a specific purpose. Everything that's in your house or anything that you use will go through a process of certification, whether it has an ETL mark on it, whether it has a UL mark on it. One of our competitors might have a CSA mark on it from Canada, which is also another competitor. In the United States, we're national recognized testing laboratories, and there's 17 of them, I believe, in the United States. We all follow the same OSHA rules. We get audited by them every year. So we're all kind of playing in the same sandbox, if you will. Now, it all depends on who you call and who you want to call, but basically it's like going to, when you go get gas, you can get gas at BP, you can get gas at Exxon, or you can get gas wherever you want. But here, you know, Intertek and UL and CSA, we all play in the same sandbox in terms of way things are carried out. So what happens is when a product goes through all the certification, we'll take a toaster that goes through certification, it gets a label on it, and it gets sent out to the public, and that means everything is good. The AHJ is fine with it. Everybody that, you know, anybody that purchases it knows that it's a safe product, and it's good to be used wherever it is. Like I said, a lot of times in larger pieces of equipment or larger installations, sometimes these products are just not approved. They don't have approval on them, or they came from Europe, or they came from Japan, and they're not labeled. No third party took a look at it. Nobody deemed that it's a safe product. So that's where we come in. As I mentioned earlier, OSHA, the division, everybody thinks of OSHA work safety. However, they have a division called the National Recognized Testing Laboratories. And as I mentioned before, right here, each NRTL has a scope of test standards, and each NRTL uses its registered certification marks to show product conformance to the applicable product safety test standards. Toasters, lighting fixtures, televisions, things like that. They go through the testing process, and when they're done and completed, they get a listing mark on the product itself. These are all the NRTLs that are in the United States that are out there. As you can see, Intertek is one of them. Met Labs, which is down in Maryland, Baltimore, Maryland. UL has locations around the United States as well. I kind of sometimes I tend to get ahead on some of the presentation. So if I've gone over it already, I apologize, but I'll hit it again twice. National Recognized Testing Laboratories, they're recognized and certified by OSHA. They must also be approved by the local AHJ, provide listing, labeling of equipment per applicable standards, along with ongoing follow-up surveillance. Now, things in the field obviously are not going to have ongoing follow-up surveillance. However, back to my toaster situation, you have a toaster, and every quarter, somebody will come out from our facility or our company to make sure things are being manufactured the way they were when we first saw the product, when we first tested the product. That goes on quarterly throughout the year. From time to time, standards change, so they have to have the product reevaluated to the new requirements of the new standard. If everything is well after that point, they get their report again. They get to label the product with the new and improved standards that were out there. So like I said, there's always constant checking and constant surveillance on those listed products. Without the NRTL mark on a product, there's no way to trace the product. There's no way to know if it was actually tested, what went on with the whole product itself. So manufacturers are allowed to manufacture both listed and unlisted parts. However, did the unmarked product use the same components when it was originally tested? Was the unmarked product produced in an authorized location? And that's what we do on that side of the business. So when you get listed products or recognized products, you know somebody went through and said, all right, this is good. They went through all the testing. They went through all of the processes with it, and they're being audited every quarter. Once again, the listing and marks, the use of the system employed by listing organization allows the authority having jurisdiction to identify a listed product. That's what all the marks are on the products that you see. This is the process of the listing process of these pieces of equipment. One or more samples are reviewed by an NRTL. They undergo construction review based on applicable standards, undergo testing per the applicable standards. Now, applicable standards are things that the testing organization will determine. Lighting fixture will be UL 1598. Telephone will be UL 62368. I say UL because UL is the standard writing body. They also write standards. And what Intertek and all the other NRTLs do, they're in committees. They're on committees that suggest to UL what needs to be changed or what updates happen. And that's why these standards get updated once a year, a couple of years. It depends on what happens out there. So we go through the product, clause by clause, constructionally and testing. We create a listing report. Manufacturing location is inspected. They verify the ability to produce the product. They have to go through production line testing that we verify and make sure everything is safe when it leaves their facility and it's built the way that we were supposed to do, or built the way that we looked at it. The purpose of this testing, it's pretty obvious: to prevent shock hazards, prevent fire, environmental hazards, limits of exposure and physical hazards, things like that. Because every clause, everything in a standard is there for a reason, meaning somebody either got hurt or property got damaged, there was a fire or things. So certain products and certain standards have crazy, I don't want to say crazy, but odd requirements just because of that. So we go through all of them, UL, CSA, we all go through all of them to make sure everything is the way it should be before it goes out to the marketplace. If you need to figure it out, if you're not sure if something is listed, because sometimes there are fraudulent marks out there for either, any of the agencies. Every agency has a list of what is actually listed. We have a website, UL has a website, any NRTL, you can usually find if it's really listed or not. And if you do have any questions, then you end up calling one of the certification bodies, which is not a hard thing to do. Our information is out there and you can get in touch with us. This is what the Intertek directory of listed products look like. Pull it up on your website, type in lighting fixtures or the name of the company, and it'll come up. It'll tell you everything that we have listed with that product or with that company. If it's not there, then obviously it's not been listed and it could be a fraudulent mark, and we go down another path at that point. But like I said, everything's there. There's a phone number there you can contact if you're not 100% sure if it's listed, or you have me. You can always get a hold of me and I could be able to find out things for you as well. What to do when a product is not listed? What do you do? I mean, you're on a construction site or you're putting these things in. You're not going to be able to not put them in because it's part of the job. Yes, you can return the purchase and find one that's certified, or you can have that product certified or call for a field evaluation of the product. And that's kind of where this presentation is going to take off into that field labeling aspect. Just wanted to give you a little quick background of what we do and how we do it. I know it was kind of quick. But like I said, it goes through the process, and that's when things go out in the field. If nothing is marked in the field, well, then you have to give somebody a call. That's where we come in. Who does these inspections? Well, any field evaluation body, which is us. We're an organization or a part of an organization that performs field evaluations of electrical or other equipment. That's exactly what we do when we go out into the field. Okay, previously many of them conducted field evaluations, but nothing really was identified or listed or written down. Usually only two standards were used, which was the NFPA 79 and UL 508A. And sometimes those were not even applicable. Many times no field testing or justification of wave testing was done. Nothing was done out there. So what we try to do, these are important standards that we do use when we're out in the field. 508A for control panels on large industrial equipment, and NFPA 79 for the industrial equipment. But there again, if you're installing lighting fixtures, that's UL 1598, or if you're installing fans, that's UL 507. So we're going to actually look at those standards as well when we're out in the field for those types of products, because you can't do a fan to an industrial control panel standard. It just doesn't fit. So they provided common standards for field evaluations to ensure minimum competencies, excuse me there, and minimum qualifications. They provide a common guideline to conduct a field evaluations with practices, expectations, and understandings, and basically the report that gets issued. The NFPA came up with these two different standards, which are standard for competency of third-party field evaluation bodies, which is us, and recommended practice and procedures for unlabeled electrical equipment evaluations. Those are not standards for products. They're just showing you, hey, this is what the third party can do for you. This is what you need to find in them. And we don't test to those, but they're more like a guidance document for us to conduct these evaluations. This is the standard third-party field evaluations. It establishes criteria and requirements for entities to evaluate field unlisted, uncertified, or unique equipment in the field. That's us. We're allowed to do that. They establish the criteria of what we need to do and how we need to carry out these inspections in the field. Certain key points for field evaluation bodies. They don't have to be NRTLs. We are one of them. UL, TUV, you'll get more, I don't want to say more competency from them, but they're the people that know what's going on. Most of them, as it says, most of them are field evaluation bodies, and they got to be third party, independent, impartial, and competent, which we are, because we are audited every year by OSHA and make sure that we're doing what we're supposed to be doing. We purchase the appropriate standards. We have capable business practices when we go out into the field. We're sending out people that are seasoned veterans. They've been around. They know the NEC. They know the National Electric Code and things that show up out in the field that some people are, oh my God, what do I do with? Here again, the NFPA 79, the provisions of this standard shall address the requirements for the qualification and competency of the body performing field evaluations on electrical products and assemblies with electrical components. That's us. Okay, I kind of keeps going on and on about these things of what we are and what we do. We use national recognized standards. They're relevant to the products that we see out there, and it's kind of, we got to be impartial. I mean, these are overall must be impartial, responsible, and legal businesses, which we are. Documentation and procedures of safeguards for the impartiality, which we do. All of these qualifications Intertek does possess and will allow us to go out there and do those evaluations. Third party impartial, yes. Cannot supply or design products of types for which it performs field evaluations. Countless numbers of time I've gone out into the field and I've done evaluations, and somebody says, well, how do I protect that? Or, well, how do I do this? We're not in the design portion of the engineering world. That's why when we look at something, we could say, well, there needs to be fusing there. We can't tell you what type of fuse. That has to be put in by, you know, the electrical guys that are doing the work. I can't do that because I'm supposed to be impartial, and I cannot design things like that. There again, that puts us in a bad spot. If I say, well, you need to put a 5 amp fuse in there. You put a 5 amp fuse in there, the fuse doesn't blow, something happens, and somewhere down the road, well, Intertek told me to do that. So we do stay away from that. We do have a consulting branch that can help with those things, but when we're out in the field, we don't do those things. Can't provide any products or services that could compromise the confidentiality, objectivity, or impartiality of its field evaluations, and the actual design or completion of the corrective action shall not be performed by the field evaluation body. Okay, so those are the things I just hit on. We can't do that. What is a field evaluation? What do we do? What's out there? It's a process used to determine conformance with requirements for one-of-a-kind, limited production, used or modified products that are not listed or field labeled under a certification program. Just had an evaluation that I, excuse me, I completed that there was a switchgear panel out in the field, and the manufacturer, when it left their facility, it was labeled. It had no problems, it was out there. However, when it was out there, the electricians removed a disconnect switch and put a new disconnect switch in. Now, as soon as you remove anything, as soon as you change anything, you have voided the listing on that product. That's like if you have an iron at home and your dog chews off part of the cord and it doesn't work. So what do? Like everybody else, you go to Home Depot, you cut off the cord, you put a new plug in and you plug it in. Well, as soon as you cut that cord, you modified a piece of equipment and it's no longer listed. So if anything happens to that iron, you're at fault now because you modified the piece of equipment. That's what happens out in the field. Okay, so when it gets modified, changed, or moved, that's when we come into play to do these field evaluations. NFPA 791 are recommended guidelines, not a standard. It's just saying recommended practices of here, this is what you do. This is how you go about your field evaluations. It's not a standard, but it does let the AHJ, it informs the AHJ about recommended practices for the field evaluation. So they know what's going on, or they know what's going to happen when someone comes out there to do an evaluation. I've run into many inspectors that have no idea what a field evaluation is, or no idea what we can provide or do for them. So they you could review 791. It'll know, then they'll know what we can do. There it goes. It allows the AHA to better determine the acceptability of the field evaluation, provides recommended practices to the field evaluation bodies to use in evaluations, and is consistent and reliable manner for better acceptance. So we can, the considerations are the applicable standards that go into it, primary evaluation or desktop review, on-site evaluation, applicable testing, special circumstances, identical products, and non-installation sites. All of these things are taken into consideration when we go out and do a field evaluation. A lot of times, there again, I'll go back to the one that I was down in Maryland doing. Layout drawings showing components that match the schematic and ID marks on or near the components. Electrical schematic drawings are huge when I go out into the field. Large pieces of equipment, I mean, as you can see, there's a lot of stuff going on in a lot of these schematics. We have to verify components. We have to verify wiring in these large pieces of equipment. So when things do come over from Europe, some of the wiring needs to be changed. Some of the components need to be changed as per the schematic drawing and what we see during the evaluation with the standards. At that point in time, we end up, we pick the applicable standards that we need to use for that piece of equipment. Going back to a fan, a UL 507. We're not going to use UL 1598 for lighting fixtures for a fan. So we're going to select the appropriate standards, make sure the product is within the scope of that standard. Sometimes we run into multiple types of standards, multiple type usage. Could be a large piece of equipment, which would be your NFPA 79. And it also could have refrigeration in it because we could do UL 471. There could be a laser in it. So we end up figuring out what standards are need to be used out in the field. And then we go ahead and evaluate the product. Now, I'll tell you the field evaluation standards or the field evaluation products and things that we do, it's not as intensive as if the field evaluation would be taking place in our facility for a listing, because once again, a field label is a one-off, one or two pieces of equipment that are out in the field. So during the construction review, we'll review every clause in the standard and see how it applies to the product. Well, one clause could be front door must not be red. Well, if you have a front door and the standard said it couldn't be red, then that door needs to be changed. So that's how the construction review, it kind of vets out all of the shall we say, non-compliant constructions that were done. Like, I'll give you another example, a door on a swing out door on a control panel. I'd say 90% of the time, I never see that grounded. There's always a PEM stud on the door, but it's not grounded. So, well, that is something that has to be grounded. That's part of the construction evaluation. One of the clauses will indicate, is the door grounded? No, it's not, because there's no wire there. So those are certain things that we look at when we go out and do these evaluations. Once enclosures, disconnecting means overcurrent, bonding, things of that nature. I'll tell you right now, during a field evaluation, the biggest things that we look for is protection of the wiring, protection of the circuitry, what breaker panel, what breaker box does it go back to? Does it have proper circuit breakers and protection in there as well? I mean, you can't put 50 amps through a 18 gauge wire, and people try to do that. So we're working hand in hand with the standard and with the NFPA and the NEC to make sure that not just the product is safe, the way it's installed, does it need a disconnect or a knife switch on the wall? Does it need an e-stop? So we review the whole area, not just the product itself. Receptacles, lighting, accessories, wiring markings, all of those things go into a field evaluation during construction review. Okay, and certain things need to be fixed, certain markings need to be added, components might need to be removed. I was doing one in Delaware where they had a fuse panel that had 20 different fuses on it. Only 8 of them were used, but all of them were populated. So none of them were labeled, so they had to add labeling. They had to take ones out that weren't in there, so not to confuse the people that are working on the piece of equipment. Those things are identified during our construction review process. Other things that go into consideration is who's going to operate the equipment, who can touch the equipment, who comes in contact with the equipment during a daily basis, a daily usage. And also into the servicing of the equipment. I'll go back to the circuit breaker, the fuses. If they're not identified in terms of the schematic and not identified on the product itself, how's a service guy going to know what fuse goes to what area? So those are different things that we look at as well when we come out into the field. Well, here's the NEC definition of what field label is. Equipment or materials to which has been attached a label, symbol, or other identifying mark of the field evaluation body indicating the equipment or materials were evaluated and found to comply with the requirements as described in the accompanying field evaluation report. So what happens is after Intertek goes out and reviews the product and everything is fine, we put our label on it. The label says ETL field evaluations, and it's serialized, and we keep a list of those in the offices that do these field evaluations. You also do get a report from us. The report consists of probably 6, 7, or 8 pages. Indicates the report, indicates the product, where it's installed, how many of them were there, pictures of the evaluations, pictures of the product, and also a picture of the label on the product. A lot of times out in the field, the inspectors just want the label. Sometimes they just want the report. Other times they want both. That's why we do both. So you'll have something in hand to show the inspector, and he'll be able to see, all right, well, good, everything's good. They have the label on it. The report will come down the road. So we make sure we give both because AHJs are always asking. Like I said, we look at the appropriate clauses in the standards. We cannot do destructive tests out in the field because the fact that there's only one product. So we need to determine that, all right, it has proper fusing, it has proper breakers, it has proper wiring, it's enclosed, it's grounded, because nobody's looking at it after we look at it the first time. So these evaluations could be very complex, or they could be very easy to do. I've done some that have lighting fixtures installed at a clothing store on shelf panels. It's simple. There's an LED strip, there's a enclosed power supply, and it gets hardwired to the wall. That's a simple evaluation. So we go in there, we one time and we're out. They can't move the product that it says product cannot be relocated. And if they do move the product, then it has to be evaluated again where it is actually installed. Okay. A lot of times people mistake a field evaluation with doing something out in the field. Now, a field evaluation are conducted at the final installation site. So there again, people that are contractors, people that are electricians, they're out on the job and they're putting these lighting fixtures in and, oh no, we need these looked at. Well, send them to Intertek. No. We have to come out and look at the final installation site. We need to see the surroundings, the operation and maintenance, and servicing areas out in the field. Preliminary evaluations can be done at the manufacturing facility, which I've done before. I kind of call it a hybrid field evaluation. A client has 50 lighting fixtures that are going to be sent to New York City or Philadelphia or DC, and they don't have a mark on them, but they do need a mark. Okay, so Intertek can go out to the facility where they are, a manufacturing facility or a distribution area or wherever it might be, and do a field evaluation per se on those products. Can't be labeled yet because they have to be installed to be labeled. So what that does, that gives the contractor a good feeling that, okay, well, Intertek did look at them at the manufacturing facility. That's a good thing. They're going to be shipped here and we're going to install them. And then Intertek will come back out and label the product. Gives everybody I like to say, warm fuzzy that, okay, things are moving in the right direction. So I've done them as well, but the final labeling will be done at the installation site. Like I said, the report will be created after that is done. It goes through a review process here within Intertek, and it'll be shipped out to the person that contracted us to do that work. A lot of times, it might not be the contractor that's installing the product. It might not be the building inspector that needs it labeled. It might not be any of those people. It might be the manufacturer of the product. So what happens in that case, he gets a copy of the report, and then that report will be sent out to the AHJ or whoever needs to look at it. If there's any items that were changed out in the field, okay, that's fine. If there's a problem, I'll go back to the wiring to the door. That would be noted in the original construction review that, hey, you know what, they don't have a ground wire. It'll be noted. During the evaluation when we're on site, the electrician comes and put a ground wire there. That'll be noted as it's been fixed and the nonconformity has been removed. However, it was there to begin with, and it'll be documented just so they know that, okay, we found something, okay, and it was fixed. Once again, I did mention this before about the switchgear box that was modified. Yeah, it might be listed. It might have already had the product listing on there, but they've changed something. They wired something differently. They put a different component in it or things of that nature, and that voids the listing. So you need to be cognizant of that when you're out in the field or when you're doing any of these things, that if you change anything in any of these products, we need to be called to do a field evaluation. Same thing with used equipment. A lot of times manufacturers go out of business or whatever, and they end up selling these pieces of equipment to another manufacturer. Okay, it's used, it's been moved, it doesn't have a listing on it. Well, what do we need to do? Well, we need to go out and do an evaluation. Some of the concerns with these used equipment is, yes, it's damaged, the parts are broken, they had to do some changing of the products, this and that. So once again, we come out and take care of those evaluations. Some other concerns of used equipment, just a normal wear and tear, abnormal events, and any modifications, things of that nature. Anything changed or modified, we do have to come out and take a look at it. It just takes the liability off of the contractor and the people that made the product originally. That we had a third party come in and everything looks good. What was modified? Why was it there? What did they do? What was changed? That's another indication. Hey, we need somebody to come out and take a look at it. All the evaluations will have a report. It'll detail where it is, who did it, what, why, number, how many are in there, how many field labels were done, what standards and what procedures were used. That's what comes with that 7 to 8, 9, 10-page report that we have. But once we're done, it'll be labeled, it'll be serialized, it'll have everything on there. Not a listing mark because there's only one. We applied to it, and we applied the mark to it, and we issued you a report. This is what our field labels look like on the right-hand side of the screen. Over here, this is what they look like. They're serialized. So we keep track of them. Our listing mark is here, and it'll indicate what standards were used to verify, to make sure the product was safe. This number here is a manufacturing location number of the product that this is applied to. Here, there's no number because we applied the mark, and it'll just tell you, it'll give you that we looked at it to what standard that we needed to do. When we're done, label and report, as I had mentioned. These are some things that do happen. Field label applied, but no report is available. You will always get a report from us. I said if the product is moved from one building to another, why was it moved? What was done? What wasn't done? And you will always get a report indicating any of that from us. As I mentioned earlier, in regard to differences between listed and field evaluated products, listing, full testing, multiple samples, follow-up services, things of that nature. Field evaluation, it's a one-shot deal. We're in and out, and you guys are on your way. We don't do any destructive testing. We don't break down any of the components. There's no follow-up inspections, and those are limited to exactly where the product is being installed. When a manufacturer is authorized to apply a listing mark but left factory without labeling, well, the product is inspected to the listing report that we have for that product itself. However, we do have to go out into the field. We have to go out to the job site. We have to do the field labeling. We cannot just label it or cannot send a label as it says here. No labels can be mailed or implied on a job site by the contractor. That's where we come in, and that's where our job is. So when do you need to call for these things? This is, when it comes down to what do you need to do? Well, there's no listing mark on the product, or the AHJ has said you need to have somebody come in and look at it. That's really the bottom line when it comes down to field evaluation. When the product is altered, you had to change the enclosure to fit it somewhere. Well, you modified the product. You need to call for a field evaluation. Or in your gut instinct. I've had that happen before. I've had some fixtures that have been installed and their have a UL mark on it or an ETL mark on it. Contractors think, well, this doesn't look right. And sure as enough, when I go out and look at it, or when Intertek goes out and looks at it, no, there's something wrong. There's no ground wire, or there's no proper connection to the terminal blocks or things of that nature. So those are also ways that we should come out to do a field evaluation. Counterfeit logos, they happen all the time. They happen all the time. I don't want to say, but when it comes from the Far East, some of those manufacturing locations have put on fraudulent marks. And how do you know 99% of the time, the mark is fine. But how do you know? If you have a question or concern, you can look it up on the websites, or you could give me a call. I get this question all the time. Well, what is the CE mark? CE mark it means nothing to me. It doesn't mean anything to me. It's something over in Europe, but it has no bearing on the United States. I could put a CE mark on a pen and sell it with no testing. So the CE mark, I've heard that from contractors and people. Oh, it's CE approved. Doesn't matter to me. We need to go out and take a look at it. It has to be approved by a national recognized testing laboratory. So like I said, some of the differences between CE and CE, I don't know why this is in here. I should have removed this. I apologize for that screen. Let's move on. For fake listing marks, it's hard to determine what's fake and what's not fake. But like I said, give us a call or look it up on our websites. Listed enclosures, standards for, these are just different standards and things that have been used out there in the field on products that we see from time to time. Just one final thing is a field evaluation is not a replacement for a listed product, but they can be used to accept the product. Meaning we can go out there and we can do what we need to do to verify that the product is safe as it's installed in the field, and no one's going to get hurt or shocked from what's out into the field. So that's really kind of it. I know I kept speaking quickly and I kept moving along quickly. I wanted to make sure I hit all the highlights and hit all the slides in the presentation. So now, is there any questions out there? I'm sure there is some. Like I said,
Yep.
If you don't have any right now, that's fine. You can always get in touch with me down the road because you all have my information.
Thanks, Scott. Yeah, we do have some questions.
Sure.
Oh, it looks like Matt got frozen for a moment.
You're frozen.
Yeah, all right, I'll take over. The first question comes from an electrical inspector. Is it your company's job to witness the testing or conduct the testing? For example, the basic impulse levels and WCRs.
I didn't hear that end of that. I'm sorry.
Oh, no worries. I apologize. So let me just read it again. Is it your
Sure.
company's job to witness the testing or conduct the testing? Examples, the basic impulse levels and WCRs.
Okay, it depends. I mean, I'll do that in two separate ways. When we do our testing here in our facility, our engineers are doing the testing and doing what is required by the standard. When we go out into the field, the engineers again are doing those testing, are taking tests, are doing tests on the product while they're out in the field. We do provide witness testing programs for manufacturers and for people out in the field. However, it really comes down to us being out there and putting the mark on the product and doing the testing out in the field.
Thanks, Scott. Another question. I have a client that has purchased bus bars and cranes from a supplier that is based in Germany. The bus bar electrical enclosure is small and the termination space does not meet guidelines in the NEC for termination space between the lug and the enclosure wall. The enclosure contains a CE mark and the supplier indicates that the equipment is built to IEC standards. Could you please speak to the fundamental differences between the US and European listings and standards?
Sure. There are some standards out there from the United States that are harmonized with Europe. Now, the main difference between what we do here and what's done in Europe is those follow-up service evaluations that happen every quarter. Okay. They don't have that over in Europe. They might do some testing over there and they might get a report, a test report, and they put the CE mark on it. But that doesn't mean anything. I could put, like I said, I could put a CE mark on my pen and sell it but I will have no data or nothing to back it up. And I can change anything I want in the pen and still continue to market it and send it out without anybody looking at it. Here, what happens is every quarter, as I mentioned, every quarter we go out and have surveillance on these products. And if our inspectors that go out to the manufacturing location find something that is not in line with the listing report or not in line with the testing that we've done, it gets flagged. What happens then is the office that issued that listing report will get notified, the client will be notified, and another investigation will be carried out to make sure the product is safe because they made a modification without letting us know.
Thank you so much. Next question. Are there times when ETL has had issues with different AHJs when doing work around the country? Do you get more calls from ECs or engineers?
Good question. Very good. It all depends. It all depends who has the problem with the piece of equipment. I've gotten calls from building inspectors. I've gotten calls from electrical contractors. I've gotten calls from AHJs, building. I mean, anybody can get in touch with us in regard to evaluations all around the country. A lot, I don't want to stereotype people, but a lot of seasoned AHJs have UL in their head as it's safe, that's safe, that's safe, that's safe. I get it, I understand, because they're the brand name. Like if you have a cold, what do you reach for? You reach for a Kleenex? No, because that's the brand name. You really reach for a tissue. So the evaluations and the things that we do are followed up quarterly. That's not what happens over in Europe. And so I will never accept something that's just CE marked. Simple as that.
Another question from the attendees. Will they be able to reach out to you for a copy of this presentation?
Yes, I believe so. I do have a, yes, I do have a copy I can send out.
Yeah, we'll be providing your contact information
Perfect.
to the attendees.
Okay.
Final question in the chat. Generally, how long does it take you to get you guys out to a job site?
It could be the next day. I'll go back to the one I did last week in Maryland. They called us on a Wednesday. I was there Thursday. If there's openings in our scheduling here, and we have in my office here, engineers that do this type of work, there's 4 of us. But we have offices all over the country and people that do this type of work. But usually we're pretty quick to get out there, because what the problem is that either the job is on hold, the electrical inspection is on hold, or the occupancy is on hold. Something's waiting for this to get completed. And the longer it takes us to get out there, the longer it takes for you guys to get things completed and done.
Great. Well, everybody, I think we've hit the end of our questions. There were some great questions. Scott, I want to thank you very much for your presentation. It was very informative today. I know I learned a lot, and I'm not even an electrical contractor or engineer. So with that, again, thank you. This is our second to last virtual coffee talk. Oddly enough, our next coffee talk on December 16th is going to feature the dangers of purchasing through the gray market. So it's a very nice complement to this particular session, and that's going to be hosted by Eaton and sponsored by Billows Electric Supply. So we hope to see you guys all next week. And with that, it looks like we've got one more question. Oh, no, we're good. Everyone have a wonderful day. Thanks so much. Thanks, Scott.
All right. Take care.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.